Riding just an insane 20-fight win streak. We got the champ, Weili Zhang, aka Magnum, taking on Thug Rose Namajunas. This is an absolute banger. I'm a little surprised by the odds. I feel like minus 200 for Weili Zhang and plus 170 is more distant of a line than I thought this fight might feature. I think the odds makers might be sleeping on Thug Rose a little bit here, but definitely an interesting matchup, right? 21-1 is Weili Zhang. Only 9-4 is Thug Rose. It's very interesting to see Thug Rose only having 13 total fights, but most of those fights have been in the UFC, and she's just been around for almost a decade now. So it's interesting. It's one of those fighters where her total fights isn't a crazy number, but all the UFC fights and all the UFC experience is obviously there for Thug Rose. She has some wins over some of the best to ever do it. Joanna Champion. She avenged that loss to Jessica Andrade and has nice wins over Overkill Hill and Michelle Watterson before that. Tisha Torres as well. Weili Zhang, though, also someone who took out Tisha Torres, also someone who took out Jessica Andrade. She's the one who took the belt from Andrade, and that was quick work 42 seconds in China, and that fight was just over before it ever began. So very fascinating to see how Weili did in that championship fight. And then her most recent title defense was just an all-time classic versus Joanna, right? Probably the greatest women's fight of all time. Up there is one of the greatest just fights of all time, regardless of gender. That was just a phenomenal showing by both of them. And for me, it really showed that Weili Zhang has the ability to dig deep, fight in those late championship rounds. And I think she might have to work her way through some tough spots in those championship rounds again on Saturday against Thug Rose. How do you see this one going down? Are you going with Thug or are you going with Weili Zhang?
Yeah, this is a dream fight. I've been wanting this fight for a while. I'm so glad that this has come to fruition for us and all the sweaty fans. Man, this is such a hard one to pick because, I mean, Weili Zhang, Magnum. I mean, she is no joke. Like you said, 20 fight win streak. She has just been ripping people. Her last fight, definitely one of the best fights ever in history. Definitely the best woman fight in history, in my opinion. Absolute warriors. But yeah, she went versus Joanna, which Rose beat twice. And Joanna did pretty good, even though she had a hematoma, the side of Pluto. She went through that whole fight somehow and survived. And she started winning those later rounds versus, Zhang. And that's where it kind of worries me, where I'm actually going to go with Thug Rose because Thug Rose, I think, is going to have a similar problem, be a similar puzzle for Zhang, but I think she's just way better than Joanna. The fact that she didn't run through Joanna like I thought she was actually going to makes me a little more bullish on Rose. With those odds included, I really like that. But it's very hard to pick against the champ, so I get it. But my gut, I'm gonna go with Rose.
Yeah, I feel you on that. And yeah, if you're bullish on Thug Rose, this is definitely a juicy meat value stake for you. I mean, you probably will never see Rose at such plus money ever again in her career because she is usually always the favorite. She's usually the more dominant fighter out there, regardless of her opponent. And so if you think Thug is going to get this one done, then definitely something to sprinkle your sauce on for sure. You mentioned the Joanna fight, and that fight, all-time classic. I remember we were watching together, and at the very end of it, it was one of those fights where you're like, that was amazing. That fight was absolutely insane, but you have no idea who the heck won that fight, right? It was very tough to score. I feel like it could have gone either way. Ultimately, I thought that Weili should have earned the nod, but had they given that fight to Joanna, no one would have been upset. 'Cause that was just an all-time classic, back and forth barn burner. And you're right, the fights that Thug Rose had with Joanna weren't close at all. I know Joanna was kind of convinced that that second fight was competitive, but from my purview, that was just a dominant affair from Rose, and obviously she managed to put Rose out with a TKO in that first matchup too. So we always mention MMA math gets a little sketchy, but I can understand why you might be bullish on Joanna and why some might be as well. 74%, however, is going with Zhang. If you look over the Tapology numbers, half and half. Half is Brown, half is a decision, and only 26% is going with Thug Rose. I do envision this being an extremely competitive championship bout, but I got to go with Weili Zhang. I think she's going to have too much power, and ultimately, I see her maybe getting a late TKO. but at a minimum, probably winning 3, maybe even 4 rounds, and getting herself a unanimous decision if she is unable to put out Thug Rose. So, any last thoughts on this co-meet event? This is just a straight up strawweight banger. I can't wait to watch this one.
Yeah, no, I see this definitely going to the judges for this.
Okay.
I really like Rose with it. I think she has the crispest boxing. Now, does
Mhm.
she hit harder than Weili Zhang? No, not at all. I would be delusioned to think that she's gonna absolutely clap her, but I think she's gonna do damage and do very well. The part that interests me though is, will this hit the mat and how does that look? I mean,
Yeah.
Zhang's ground game in wrestling is no joke, but yet hasn't even really been displayed to the full potential. And I don't even think people realize. And also Rose too. I mean, her, how strong is she on the ground? How long can she do it? I could kind of see Weili Zhang kind of going for, if she falls into trouble on the feet, which I think is likely. I could see her trying to go for a Amanda Nunes style where smother sesh and get the win like that. So I'm very curious on those thoughts. That's what kind of runs through my head when I'm thinking on these, but I'm still going to go with Rose because I think Zhang's going to keep it on the feet, but it wouldn't surprise me if somehow this ends up on the mat.
Yeah, I'm happy you mentioned that, hitting the mat, because if it does, that's going to be super fascinating, right? Weili Zhang's a purple belt. We know Rose is a serious brown belt, and Rose has 5 submission victories to her name, and Weili has a sneaky 7. So if that one hits the mat, it'll definitely be an interesting affair for sure. You also mentioned earlier that, it's kind of a dream matchup. And do you remember when we were at UFC 235 and I think that was maybe back in 2019 or so, and we saw Weili Zhang compete against Tisha Torres. It was a fight that was just absolutely dominant for Wei Li, and sort of like a welcome to the top upper echelon of this 115 UFC division. Homecoming affair for Wei Li Zhang. That was the fight that really got a lot of people on the map. But we had a conversation that night thinking, man, how amazing would a fight versus Thug Rose be? So very cool to see about 2 years later, it's finally coming to fruition, like you said. So nonetheless, he's going with Thug Rose. I got Weili Zhang, but should be an absolute banger for sure. Check out the meat event, boys.